as young teachers, we want to do the right thing and not have somebody slip through, or what do you think? Anything else that would play into that? I mean, isn't it generally the philosophy? It depends. So that's why we continue to struggle with it, because it's all of those things. What you've said, Joy, and what our community demands. And then, of course, the children. You know, here we are in the classroom on the front lines, and you've got this spectrum of total self-starters, you know, totally into being lifelong learners, nerds like me, you know, schoolies, you know, my son continues to call me a schoolie. And then you've got those sort of in the middle, and then you've got those who, I mean, I used to struggle with the ones who are, though I was afraid I couldn't keep challenged, you know, because deep down I'm very insecure. We'll talk. Couch out later. And oh my goodness, you know, what if I can't meet their needs, and, you know, they're working at such a high level, and I'm not sure my training will serve that, and I'm not sure I can. It's flipped for me now. In my present situation, it's much more like, how do I light this fire? And that's something I've been thinking about for years also, because I know that even Janet Lane, and we had this conversation a decade or more ago about, wow, kids seem kind of different than they used to be. Wait a minute, is this just old fogey me talking, or, you know, kids these days? Or is there something happening in our society? And yeah, would you agree that stuff is going on that is making it very difficult for us to be educators in 2018? Is it 2018? So I think we have some interesting things to think about and to, I don't want to say work against, because that's so negative, but I am Irish, but deal with, because there are factors and influences way beyond the 6-7 hours that we see the students. And again, not to bring my present into this, but in the public sector, wow. We have kids that are, not that we don't in the private sector, but different kinds of reasons, and perhaps more of kids in crisis, families in crisis, and wow, getting their attention, woohoo, woohoo, and sustaining their attention, wow, because we're not a screen with bing, 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 psh, blah, 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 blah. All the things that unfortunately I really, really think technology is wonderful, and also, if not kept in check, a very difficult reality for us to be working with. So you have this spectrum of really low motivated kids. I have this one boy, I love him to death, Michael Clenhead, born on St. Patrick's Day. Mike, how come you have your sketch pad out? That's not fun. You know, that math work is not fun. Oh, Mike, you know, I've done, and if it's not fun or if he doesn't like it, this second grade boy is just putting up resistance. So he's one of the people I think about at 3 o'clock in the morning. Why are you in my bedroom? Can't you wait a few more hours? I'll be there. We'll do it. So yeah, this range of learners from those autonomous self-starters to the low motivator, almost having to scrape them up off the floor and find that match is one of the things that we're dealing with. So, you know, what are some of the secrets? Well, they're really, you know, I know this is a great group of people who've talked about, you know, growth mindsets and brain study and you know, I've been here. I know you guys are on the forefront of remarkable things. But, you know, some of the things I was thinking about was what we probably all know, when students, and again, this is really elementary kinds of things, when they see a relationship between what they're learning and how it will affect them, or influence them, or, and not only something that they like, but when they say, oh, yeah, okay, maybe I can buy into that, you know, even if it is learning about commas in a series, you know, that's one of the things, is to make it relevant to them. And boy, I'm finding that, of course, that requires a fair amount of tap dancing and encouraging and time to help them see that, yeah, okay, I'll buy into this. Let me see. And one of the things that I've always done, you know, people who know me know that, you know, I'm kind of into humor, and they say that that's something really important in the classroom for good brain learning. One of the, and this isn't really humor, but one of the things that I try to, even in the most mundane kinds of things, to make that little connection, even if it's something that's not earth-shattering in terms of a piece of academia. So go home and see. Check with your parents. See if they even remember 2 of the rules for how to use a comma. Challenge them. Let's see at dinner tonight. Or when you go home, just see, just ask your parents, Mom, Mother, Father, is a square a rectangle? Is a rectangle a square? You know, simple, silly, just some way to make a connection, some way to make it stick, because again, making these things stick, that's the other thing. Aside from getting the students' attention, woohoo, here we are, right here. Making it stick these days seems to be, I mean, they have Teflon brains, you know, they just, remember we talked about that 10 minutes ago, remember? Yeah. So those are things that I'm finding are really on the forefront of my thinking these days. Of course, children's buy-in and having them have goals for their own personal learning. You know, I found later on, I would say, you know, somewhat recently, which probably means like a decade and a half ago, that having the children think about what they want to do, what they want to achieve, what they want to get better at, of course encourages their own buy-in, helps them on track, and then helping them to achieve those goals is one of the big things involved. And then again, as I said, as Montessorians, we're already there, really. But so much stuff that you read about now talks about, well, differentiated learning. Okay, check. Learning through positive feedback. That's always been something Montessorians. And of course, it has to be specific. We're not talking about good job, and but it should be on the task itself rather than on the person. And just a little pet peeve of mine is, you know, I don't know how you feel about this, but I hear teachers say things like, I like the way you're doing that. And for some reason, that has been something that turns me off, because it's not what I like. Maybe I can see that you are working really hard on that, or, wow, you seem to be very engaged in that. You, but they don't need to hear what I like. You know? Even I can tell you're, yeah, you know, and yet these things spill out of my mouth constantly, so, you know, big old hypocrite sitting here saying that. But it's something that when I hear it, I'm trying to retrain myself as much as possible about that. And then, of course, one of the other major factors is choice. Well, we've always had choice, and that brings us to our conundrum. That darn choice, you know, and how we deal with that. Ms. Trish, you'll be happy to know that one of the brain conferences that I attended, and I'm not sure which one this was, San Francisco, maybe Boston, I don't know. Martha Caulfield. If you don't know her, you might want to look her up. She's just a master's in education, I think, but she's got www.beginwiththebrain.com. And, you know, she had this great workshop about, well, you know, I can't remember her terminology now, but as educators, we should be brain experts, because it's not happening in the big toe, you know, and it's not happening in the liver. It's happening in the brain. So she even, you know, makes a big deal about, and I know you guys do that at Senior L anyway, having children know about how their brain works. And I'm really excited as we start the new semester next week. You know, I've been talking to my kids about this a lot to get them to buy into things like morning exercises and how their brain works. Bring in a chunk of tofu, you know, and have them, this is what your brain feels like, and I've got my brain model and a whole bunch of little experiments we'll do to show what's lighting up in the brain. But she too says, well, she talks about too much choice. And again, maybe she's coming from, she's not a Montessorian. Again, this was a brain conference, learning in the brain. She talks about how too much choice is overwhelming for kids. Okay, I think we can understand that. She says no direction is antagonistic to learning. Okay, so there might be some Waldorf people or others who would take issue with that. She likes a middle ground, saying limited guided choice. And I guess that's where I've always kind of fallen in to be, you know, another one of the people that we used to work with used to say, oh, you're always a fence rider. You're always on the fence, Susan. And yeah, that's probably true. Yeah, I'm kind of that middle ground kind of person. I used to think I'd be in the diplomatic corps when I was like 17. That didn't work out. But yeah, sort of seeing, yes, that side of things, that side of things. I think I land about here. And so she kind of believes in sort of a work plan system, but again, teaching with the brain and mind, and realizing that there are a lot of different types of learners. I know I've always kind of been in the list type of work plan kind of thing. I'm a list person. I make lists of lists. I love crossing things off my list. Yay. And so I guess I've projected that. But she talks about, well, maybe try a clockwise list instead of your, you know, sort of vertical and horizontal list. Because some children might respond better to that. And I'm thinking, ooh, yeah, I love that idea. First of all, to get the idea of what clockwise means, because it's so darn abstract. And also, yeah, to honor those other types of people who see things slightly differently than that. What I really wanted to bring up today, and I didn't have the book, was a book called Love of Learning by Michael and Danielle Duffy. They're an interesting couple. They were well, both former nun and priest in previous lives, both Montessori trainers, educators, school owners formally, and running a training center in Lexington, Massachusetts now. Danielle was one of my trainers, and her husband Michael was a student in one of my classes. I took the class over 3 years because I had small children at the time. He's a former journalist. Anyway, people I really admire, although disagree with on a whole lot of things, because my dear Michael has said unequivocally, work plans are death. Okay, cheers up a little bit, Michael. Come on, man. Work plans are death. He actually said that at a local workshop one time. Okay. But the book, Love of Learning, talks about motivation in children. And I'm sorry I didn't bring a copy. And of course, what we all believe in, again, that the best motivation is intrinsic. It's from within. It's so hard to impose that on students. And it's anathema to what, we believe in terms of belief in the child and wanting to instill, light that fire and that love of learning. So they talk about the development of the will, and that the prerequisites for intrinsic motivation have to do with management, classroom management, and developing relationships. Well, again, I think relationships, we all know how important that is in dealing with young children. And it's one of the things that I just feel so strongly about. And I'm so devastated when I can't break through and make a relationship and make a connection with either the child or the parent. It's just devastating for me. And yet it happens more and more for whatever reasons. Anyway. Brain research tells us that we should stop and every 10 minutes or so, take a moment to reflect, discuss. So, any ideas about things thus far that either rub the wrong way or that seem to resonate or...
When you said making a connection, between something that you're doing academically and something that, they may see in the future or in their daily life or whatever, I think is huge. We started just last year talking with the students about the objective of the lesson before doing the lesson. Just being really transparent about why are we doing this? How do you know when you've gotten it? What is this going, how's this going to serve you as you, practice it in the future? Like finding a common multiple or something, right. How that's going to help them when they're fraction work later on. Yeah. And that seems to have really improved their motivation and just their entire understanding of why the work is purposeful.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that resonates with me a lot.
See, at the lower elementary, we just say, right, oh, because when you're in upper L, just a blanket.
Well, when you're in middle school.
Yeah. We say it from.
Don't question, just know when you're in upper L. You're in line. It's going to be so easy. Yeah, thanks for that. That's something to think about on a couple of different levels. Certainly, and I have to think, well, does that correspond, parallel, would that be something I would do at lower L? Because at lower L, we want so much more in terms of their own discovery learning and not giving it so much. And not to say that's not true at your level as well, but instead of giving all that out, having them discover, oh yeah, equilateral triangles do only have acute angles. And I'm not sure those two things equate, but I'll be thinking about that. I'll call you at 2 a.m.
I liked what you said. I don't know the phrase you said, but what you said about basically like the self-interest, like, what will this do for you? And you kind of brought that up too. And it doesn't seem like it, but in art there are these things that are boring. You don't end up with a Mona Lisa unless you do some boring stuff to get there, like sketching and revising and learning to draw lightly and learning to control your hand and all that stuff. And this year, with the help from the brain habits mind, I'm able to apply that to art and show them how it will make them better at art and then connect it to other things. And it seems like, especially with the Junior L, which is the one that's hardest for me to get on board with that stuff. They just want either draw superheroes and ponies, or they want to do the Mona Lisa, and then as soon as they can't do the Mona Lisa, they're like, oh, terrible at art, you know? So that I can kind of get them through, like, you know, having the self-control. Well, that teaches you how to learn to control your own hand, and then once you control your own hand, then you can control how much better your drawing gets. It really has set them on fire on a lot of things, because they learn, oh, well, this is what, oh, humans, this is what this can do for me, kind of a thing, rather than this is what my teacher wants me to learn in this class. So, and finding the balance between that, you know.
I always think about because I'm in early childhood, that the children are learning on a concrete level and they are moving towards abstraction. So that's always sort of in my mind, not just in terms of the materials and what they're learning, but in terms of how they're learning and what they know about how they're learning. So when I'm talking to the kids, I also point out what we were taught in training is, you know, do you know why we're learning the letter sounds? And so they get they get a connection with it. It isn't just this sort of, you know, thing we have to do. There's a reason we're doing it. And the same with how we hold a pencil, or why we're doing tweezing, or whatever it is. It's that they understand. And I wonder, because I don't work with Junior L and Senior L, I wonder if it's almost the opposite. Once they go to abstraction in their learning, they need to more concrete in how it connects to their body and their brain, like you were talking about. I don't know, just sort of.
Well, certainly
learning more about that is how we learn.
Because Montessori Elementary is called cosmic education, which self-edit. My sister took training with me, and we had our fun. The truth is, at the elementary level, you are trying to light the fire, stir up the curiosity, and give purpose. Show history of writing. Wow. Look at how this evolved. Can you imagine how, do you realize and, engender that sense of gratitude for those who came before us, for not, I sure am glad they didn't stop inventing things, because it would be hard to tell time today outside because there's not much sun, and we'd be here until dark probably. So I'm glad they didn't stop inventing after the sundial. So all of that does help to give purpose to why we're learning at the elementary level, much the way you're talking about at the early childhood and senior elementary level. Because, we're hoping that lays the groundwork for, this is why this is purposeful. This is, you see, make a connection. Yeah.
Kids making connections in the garden or outside are making connections to the natural world, and when they do that, they connect everything in the classroom to themselves when they realize that they are a part of the natural world. And I'm just so grateful that they have so many opportunities to run and play and turn over a rock and pick up a stick and look at bugs and
Becky, you've got the golden job.
I do. I'm in heaven.
This.
I'm in heaven, and I used to do horticultural therapy, so I know this, that we all are hardwired to need the connection to nature. We need that, and so many kids miss out on that, and our kids are so lucky. It's demonstrated over and over that kids make connections to their academic work better when they are able to make connections to the natural world and when they connect with nature.
Nature deficit is one of our big issues right now.
Yes.
I'm almost dreading next week, all right, going back and talking to kids about their holiday break, and you know, some of them do it just to sort of get a rise or just to. So I got to level 5 on it. All I did was play video. I got in video, and I'm just dying inside.
I know. I heard a kid say, "Oh, I don't like the outdoors. There aren't enough outlets."
Oh, yeah, that's pretty tough. You know, last March in San Diego at the AMS conference, you were there, right?
Which one?
AMS conference in San Diego last March. No, okay. There was a wonderful fellow.
I was there.
Oh, that's right, you were there. Did you go?
I'm like, did I miss?
Last March.
Yeah.
Did you go to the nature workshop? I mean, that fellow, and again, you know, we probably all know this, Jeffrey something or other, just remarkable, Australian, you know, doing things that, well, I'm not sure we would, you know, we can, but, you know, just, he made so many excellent points about the child in nature. And I was fascinated as a student of history about what he said having to do with this nature deficit. He gave a timeline of nature deficit in our society. Mm-hmm. And he said in the 60s, when air conditioning became so much more widespread in our country, everyone moved inside. Mm-hmm. In the 70s and 80s, then there was fear with the growth of suburbia, crime, AIDS, stranger danger. Mm-hmm. In the 90s, neighborhood watch, computers, no child left behind. And now in the 2000s, terrorism, increase in fear. And so all of these things have pushed us inside, pushed our kids inside. And we've got to push against that.
And parents working and fearful of
Right.
letting their kids out.
Yeah. I mean, of course, you know, a whole bunch of us, not me, of course, but people, you know, of a certain age used to play outside until dark and ride our bikes throughout the neighborhood, even without a helmet, which kind of explains things, I guess. That freedom, that unconscious learning, that is really not happening in many cases.
Well, I was going to say, I think we talked about this before, going along with that, the social component that goes with that, with just navigating on their own, problem solving, all those social concerns and issues that arise that now they don't know how to navigate on their own.
Scheduled play dates with child A and tomorrow child B, and we will go to, Hinkle Family Fun Center, whatever, So again, so many factors that, are you ready to resign yet? Because it's just tough. But no, of course we must recommit ourselves. So yeah, really good point, Becky, on that. And again, we all want your job, so watching over your shoulder. Actually, for a few pitiful minutes, I did EE here, and loved it. But didn't have quite the science background that perhaps I should have, and realized that I needed to be in the classroom. Fool. Any other ideas, thoughts? You can tell how this is me. Miss Trish, please.
During our school evaluations, when we self-reflect and others come in and observe us, some of the feedback, even though in the Montessori method and within our school culture and this movement, we feel like we're making those accommodations on a regular basis to the best of our ability, and walking that fine line of spontaneous learning versus assigned learning, because we have this responsibility to educate these children in these certain non-negotiables, I call them, right? And so what's hard for us is when outsiders come in and say, oh, that's interesting, that's good, but it's not Montessori. Or I see this was assigned, where did you leave room for extended learning? Or is there a time that it's all free choice and nothing assigned, and how then as teachers are we accountable if we pull that rug and allow for that? So again, the middle ground that you described, we're always seeking to be on not one end of the spectrum or the other, but in following the needs of the child, they need to be educated. They need the disciplines. They need those thoughts. We have to inspire